Monster Hunter Wilds is the latest IP to be ravaged by the normie masses. For the longest time, I have been such a massive Monster Hunter fan, and until recently, it has been my favorite game series. Now, the problem is, a series that used to be about careful preparation, hunting, action, skillful execution of a game plan and the monsters, has now shifted focus to story, characters, narrative, spectacle, mindless hack and slash, and the environment. And for those reasons and plenty more, I'm just not a fan of this new Monster Hunter game. I'm really not.
Didn't like it.
I feel like this wouldn't be such a big deal if it wasn't under the context of it being Monster Hunter. I mean, people are here to hunt monsters, not watch a ton of cutscenes and go look at the environment, which is hideous, by the way.
Question for you. What are those?
Yeah, everything looks so muddy and washed out, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we do, I think it's important, as we introduce what we're about to say, to let people know that between the two of us, we have some very different perspectives, and I think we'll cover a lot of ground here. For example, Monster Hunter, as I said, used to be my favorite game franchise, but you didn't really like it.
And I have very little experience in it. I've probably played 3 hours of World and maybe 20 hours of Rise, and that's about it.
And you didn't even like what you played in Rise. We had to force you to do it. Like, our friend group had to force you into it. And furthermore, I'm a veteran. I've been playing all the way back since 2004. I've earned my stripes, but Chimpo here is a Monster Hunter newcomer. I also played this game on PS5, and Chimpo has played it on PC. So, like, we've got a vast diversity of perspectives between the two of us that I think will help inform this video. Now, it's strange to note that considering how different our interaction with the series has been, we both came to a very similar conclusion about Monster Hunter Wilds. We both think that this game is a boring, soulless, streamlined slog that's been thoroughly Sony-fied.
Well, if you showed me the gameplay for this video alongside the cutscenes, I would absolutely believe you if you told me it was a Sony exclusive.
And one of my main issues with this newest Monster Hunter game, or particularly Monster Hunter starting at Worlds forward, is that there's this identity crisis that it's been suffering.
I don't know who you are. I don't even know who I'm talking to.
And I've noticed this with a lot of pre-established franchises as of late, that there's been this trend to completely remake pre-established franchises and change them from what they once were to something totally different. The premier example in my mind being God of War 2018 and Ragnarok. There's such massive departures from the original series. Now, on their own, they may be decent games, but the problem is they have the label God of War. And that's the problem with Monster Hunter Wilds. Maybe on its own, it's a decent game, but it being a Monster Hunter game is where I now have a problem.
To be fair, even on its own, I still think the gameplay is so lacking I wouldn't enjoy it.
Right, but it didn't always used to be this way. It's been so watered down and streamlined that I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy it at all. And part of the reason I didn't enjoy it is because the focus has been completely shifted. The focus needs to be on the monsters and hunting them. Now it feels like in this game, you do everything you can do to slash in an immobilized target rather than engaging in the delicate back and forth combat of the older games. I mean, in Wilds, you have so many ways to totally immobilize the monster and get free damage. And that's without even using items. You can have vine traps, you can have thunderbug traps, you can pull down hazards on their head that knock them out, you can mount them, you can wound them. Like, there are so many ways to make the fight not a fight, but a hack and slash. I'm totally okay with the mechanic of knocking a monster out if you hit it with blunt attacks. What I'm not okay with is constant disruptions to the fight that give me free damage that's completely and totally unearned.
Well, I noticed playing this that I had turned automatic SOS flare on to make it easier to where I didn't have to invite you to get in my hunts. And because of that, lots of randoms came into my hunts at times. And when we had 4 men in there, we would pound the monster into oblivion at times and he would not even be able to react to it. It was a gang jumping an unsuspecting victim, not a back and forth fight.
And that's regardless of the monster. Maybe the exception is Arkveld. That's about it.
And even then, it's really just 1 or 2 big moves. Everything else is still kind of a joke.
And that really makes me think that tons of effort, it was put all into the wrong things. Because now the story, the characters, the environment, the attention to detail, like all of it is so much better than it ever was before and so much more fleshed out. The problem is that's not the point of the Monster Hunter series. I would much rather you completely delete the story, completely delete the characters, make them nameless, give them like 1 or 2 sentences of text, but focus on the monsters. Focus on my engagement with those monsters, rather than whatever these nonsensical, boring blobs that we call characters are. And somehow, riddle me this, Polygon gets it. Out of all the people who don't understand, Polygon's out here being based, saying that Monster Hunter Wild seems soulless. What kind of clown world are we living in where Polygon's being based?
Things are truly upside down when they trip and fall into the right opinion somehow.
There are some things in this article I don't agree with, like severely don't agree with. But the author of the article does seem to understand the core problem, which is an identity problem, which has only gotten worse as Monster Hunter has gone on. Because it's gained the attention of the normies, and whenever the normies see something, and whenever it gains mass appeal, the normies come in like locusts to devour and consume. And that's what they've done here. Before we go any further though, let's get into performance. So as I said before, you, Chimpo, played on PC and I played on PlayStation 5. So what did you think about the PC performance?
Well, the PC version of this game is just an unoptimized mess. There's no other way around it. And before you come at me with the typical graphics driver or bad PC complaints, my rig is a 3080 Ryzen 9 5900 CPU and 32 gigs of memory. I have far above the recommended specs for this game, and despite that, throughout my playthrough, I averaged around 45 frames per second, occasionally getting down to the high 30s, sometimes being close to 60. The only way I could consistently get above 60 was to turn all the settings to medium and turn FSR on and play in 1080p. Granted, I have a 4K display, but I couldn't put that to use because if I did, I got 35 FPS.
By the way, this game doesn't look nearly good enough to perform as badly as it does on PC.
Yeah, I'm going to throw up some footage right here, and I'll actually show you me cycling through the resolutions and the graphics settings and let you look at this texture. It looks hideous no matter what resolution or graphics settings you are on.
Because the performance is so bad, it's sitting right now at mixed on Steam. The PS5 version's better, but it's less than ideal and has quite a few hiccups. Even in performance mode, it's mostly stable, but it looks washed out, it looks muddy, it looks bad. I dared not play in the quality mode, because performance was already, like, pretty decent, but still, like, I should not be having these issues.
And you can tell when you play this game, it has that filter, which people have lovingly began calling a piss filter on it, where everything is kind of yellowish and washed out. It makes it really ugly. And we can't give this one the same excuse as Rise, where they were pigeonholed to the Switch, because that's what they were forced to develop on, so when it came to PC, it looked hideous. They didn't have that restriction this time, and it still looks terrible.
Now, however it may look, and I would rather a game look pretty than ugly, but what I'm really here for is the gameplay. And I hate to say it, but the gameplay has been watered down to the point of mindless, boring, empty monotony. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I mean, it really feels like monsters have been made with spectacle in mind and not gameplay. And I think that's bore out in the fact that you'll have monsters like New Udra or Zuwu. They're very unique. They're both built like octopuses, octopi, however you say that. And like, sure, they're unique, but they're built so strangely that the telegraphing is really hard to get a read on because they are so unique. And that kind of strikes me as this game's core problem in a nutshell, is they went for novelty rather than relying on what works.
And I think that's just it, because when you factor in the fun parts of a fight, it's strategy, game planning, targeting weak spots, and there's none of that here, because these monsters are essentially just blobs with tentacles. You can attack any part of them equally, and it makes no difference.
But it's also really difficult to tell what they're doing ever, which is, it's part of the back and forth fight, is in order to make an informed decision, I need to have clear telegraphs where I can understand what the threat is and what you're about to do.
But luckily, they're not threatening in the slightest, so even if they do hit you due to bad telegraphs, you won't suffer for it.
Oh, it doesn't matter. They're like, this is a baby game. IGN is saying this game is too easy. Now, part of the difficulty you do have is that the environments, and again, this goes back to the point we're making about gameplay being watered down. It's so focused on the environment that instead of just giving you like a flat plane to fight on, every environment has to be a small cave or a slanted dune in the desert, or some sloped hill. We can never just have a flat plane to fight on. It's so annoying. Again, like, the environments are the most alive and immersive they've ever been, but the problem is they get in the way of the gameplay instead of aiding. To further illustrate the point, the need for careful and deliberate preps before a hunt is almost entirely gone due to how plentiful materials are in the environment. Like, let me give you a core example. In previous Monster Hunter, you would have to have hot drinks in a frozen area or cold drinks in a hot area to mitigate the environmental disasters that could come upon you. These are essentially rendered pointless because of how plentiful the various bugs on the wall are that serve the same function, or the mushrooms that you can just grab right before you enter a hot area or a cold area. that give you the thing that you need. Like these environmental hazards, they might as well not even be there because of how easily they are negated. Furthermore, a great deal of player agency has been removed in this game. Traversal, to me, is largely destroyed by how aggressively the Secret autopilots you. I mean, you hop on this dude and he's taking off. They set him to autopilot automatically, and I get that you can turn it off, but man, is it annoying that this Secret picks you up and just takes you halfway across the map while you're trying to do something else on him.
What kind of bothers me about it is it seems like it's moving in the same direction of, scroll on your phone as you're riding to the hunt. Don't pay attention. Second monitor content.
That's exactly what it feels like. We'll do all this navigating for you. Leave it to us. Just sit back and scroll on your phone. Take a little pee break.
Yep, you just worry about hitting Y 100 times in a row once we get to the monster.
I wish it wasn't so. This breaks my heart, man. The story keeps you so tightly on rails that you cannot deviate during a main story mission.
Well, I remember when we were streaming this game, I kept trying to deviate to grab plants and stuff, and it wouldn't let me. And even at one point, I was going the proper way, but I got just a few steps ahead of my allies, and it forced me to turn around backwards because I was getting too off the rails for them.
Oh, and speaking of the walkie-talkie sections where you slowly walk along and engage in dialogue with your party, there are over 10 instances where this happens, where all agency is removed from you. It is painful. It is painful how bad this is. Now, if the story is good, maybe there'd be something there, but it's not. It's fluff. It's filler.
Well, and there's some games that I've really loved that have done this before. The Gears of War series comes to mind. And while looking back on it, I don't even like it then, thinking about it now, at least then, it was one of the few ways you could have, remote characters that aren't with you talk to you over a radio for your commanding officer to give you orders or something. In this game, the characters are with you, and you still have to do these slow walk sections where you have no control.
When I get it, you don't want someone yapping at you where there's high-octane gameplay going on and you can't focus on it, but we also need to avoid the opposite end of the extreme, which is what we have here, where you slowly walk forward and are so on rails that it pulls you out of the experience and makes you want to play on your phone.
And if you feel the information being presented in these walkie-talkie sections is that important, put it in a cutscene.
Either let me interact with the game or don't. Don't give me this weird mixture of both with the walkie-talkie sections. I hate those so much. And that's what we mean whenever we say the sonification of this game. It's the walkie-talkie sections. Now, moving on to another reason why I don't like this game. The difficulty is non-existent. Like, all struggle has been removed. All of it. And I do mean all of it. Again, I know I'm beating on this drum a lot. Even IGN is saying this game is too easy. Like, you have no more careful preparation before hunts. Now, just recently, I've gone back and I've started playing Monster Hunter Freedom Unite on the PSP, and these games are they're so different. In Monster Hunter Freedom Unite and in previous Monster Hunter games, you had better be prepared carefully with the items, the traps, and the tools that you take, because if you aren't, this game will chew you up and spit you out. I mean, I have such fond memories of the dual Tigrex fight in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, and the planning and the preparation and the careful examination of my inventory before I went, because if I got that wrong, I'd have to do it all over. And yeah, there was some inconvenience, but there was also a lot of stress to get things right and a lot of engagement on my part. Now, the cat is so OP, the items in the world are so plentiful, they remove all danger, all need for prep. There were multiple times when I would go on quest and wouldn't even remember to take a potion with me. I mean, the first time I fought Guardian Ebony Otogarin, or Suwu, I did it without using a potion, because the cat is so overpowered with heals, with traps, with things like that, you can't die.
Well, and on top of all the stuff you just mentioned, you really don't even have to worry about having proper gear, equipment, builds, and, giving mind to your stats and skills. Because I rarely upgraded my gear throughout the main story, and I almost went out of my way to not take appropriate items and gear. In fact, in the one hunt where you have to capture the monster, I didn't even bring traps. And that all being said, I fainted 3 times in 35 hours, and one of them was I screwed up a quick time event.
Yeah, old Monster Hunter, and there was some inconvenience here. I'm not looking back on the past with rose-tinted glasses. There is some inconvenience, there's a lot of quality of life that's missing, but there was also engagement with that game that's not here with this one. Because old Monster Hunter highly incentivized you to craft and use very specific armor sets for their skills to help you engage with the boss that you're fighting. And now many skills have either been outright removed, and now there's a separation between weapon skills and armor skills. So instead of you in most Monster Hunters just filling up your armor with offensive stats because that's what you want to do in a Monster Hunter game, a game about grinding monsters for their parts, you want to be as offensively capable as you can be. Now you mostly are relegated to defensive skills, which you don't need because the game is so easy. In most Monster Hunter games, typically, and even in low rank this is true, there was a wall. There was a monster that challenged me that I had to learn, that I had to prep for, that I had to prepare for. That is gone. There were no walls, there were no challenges. Even the high-rank tempered or frenzy monsters posed no threat and had minimal differences between them. They weren't chunking you for a third or a half of your health. They weren't ever threatening you in any substantive way. And even if they were, the cat's like, I got you, fam. Heal bomb.
Well, and it's interesting to note that where we're at in this game, the current in-game is tempered monsters and frenzied monsters, which are only available in high rank. And these really pose no more threat than the existing monsters, and the differences with them are so minimal, it kind of defeats the purpose of even calling them end game. Because the tempered monsters essentially just have more health, do more damage, are a little faster, and a bit more aggressive. And the frenzied monsters are actually the exact same thing, except they have less HP, but they can afflict you with frenzied, which just means you take more damage from their hits if you get infected with it.
Oh, also, there's no more need for careful shot selection. Now, Chimpo didn't know this, but I told him. In previous Monster Hunter games, proper shot selection was the difference between a 10-minute hunt and a 20-minute hunt. That if I chose to hang out and attack the monster's legs, sure, it'd be safer, but I'd be punished by spending more of my time doing it because he's not vulnerable there. And so there's this risk-reward system where if I go to attack his face, yeah, that's the danger zone, but I also get a lot more damage for doing it. Now, because of the wound system, you can put a wound anywhere. So if I wound his legs, I can now do massive amounts of damage on his legs in a safe area. It, again, destroys this delicate balance and this difficulty that is much needed to create this intensity, this engagement that is just gone.
And not only are the wounds so plentiful and seemingly generous, but because you can now do these focus attacks to them, they're so overpowered because the monster will just get repeatedly staggered by you opening up these wounds and then doing the focus attacks on them.
There are multiple times I did like 3 or 4 in a row, and it does so much damage.
And I think that's a great segue into one of the other criticisms we have with it, which is the mount system in this game is so easy and it is absolute free damage and there's no risk to doing it. Every single time I have ever mounted a monster, the little mini game of him trying to shake you off while you hit him, I opened up 3 free wounds on him. Focus attacked one of them, jumped off, and then the people hunting with me or myself focused attacked the other 2.
By the way, keep in mind, while the monster is mounted, you and your party members do no damage to it. So you essentially just sit there and wait. You sharpen up your weapons and you sit there and you wait and you watch. You're relegated to being Destiny in a room with his wife and a black guy. They make you a cuck while you're waiting for someone to finish him out.
I just can't do it.
And even further, you have no more scouring the map to track and find the monster. You instantly know where he is. The hunting part, figuring out where he is, learning his patterns, learning where he moves, learning where he hangs out, learning where he goes, gone. All of it gone.
Well, and the thing with that is, in a way, I can get on board with less tedium, but it's not Monster Hunter anymore at that point if you don't hunt the monster.
Yeah, I do go back and forth on that one because there's a part of me that likes knowing where they're at because it streamlines the action, which is why I'm here. But there was some merit to finding out where the monster was, learning his locations, learning where he goes.
Or maybe there's some balance to be struck where at least the first time you find him, you might actually have to hunt him, and then maybe subsequently you can select him from the menu the way you do now and just ride out to his location.
Right. I think Worlds actually got this right, and we have walked back on that decision. And furthermore, now there's no searching for an opening to sharpen your weapon due to combat. The secret has completely eliminated it. And this isn't even a WoW specific thing. Rise had the issue as well, where this necessary mechanic has no risk to it. It's necessary, you have to do it, but there's never a moment where you're unsafe doing it because of the secret or the Palamute. Now, contrast that with a game like Hollow Knight and its healing system, where this was a necessary thing. You want to do this and you're looking to do this to keep yourself alive and in the fight, but you can't do it in neutral. You have to find openings. You have to be careful. You have to plan about when and where you're going to use this.
That's the whole point of having the mechanic to begin with. If it doesn't have a cost, just remove it.
You know, and I guess that's the problem, is it's become so easy because there's no cost to anything, ever. Now, another thing that I loved about old Monster Hunter, and it makes its way here, but it has no purpose, is an old Monster Hunter, you would want to carefully position yourself around the monster and even around your team to ensure that you didn't interrupt teammates. If you've played old Monster Hunter, I'm sure all of you can remember the frustration, especially if you're a lance player or a sword and shield player, of the longsword user coming up behind you and using a spirit attack and tripping you. Longsword users have been a nuisance from day one, but now what you can do is just use a flinch-free jewel or a shock absorber jewel. And it goes back to that thing of, why is this a mechanic if it is so easily ignored? Either make it a mechanic or get rid of it. Also, why can't I trip the longsword user? Why can't I go Operation Taste of His Own Medicine? Why can I not do this?
Yeah,
why does longsword get that privilege?
We don't mess with virgin longsword users around here. We are Chad,
Yes.
Hammer, and Switch Axe users.
We're Chad sword and shield users.
You really don't need any more careful team coordination or any kind of team dynamic to cut tails, get KOs, paralyze monsters. You used to be incentivized by getting rare drops and materials to do these things, but that's gone now. You don't have to grind for these parts because they're dropped fairly liberally, and a lot of times if you look at quest rewards, you will get the things that you used to only get by cutting tails in previous games.
One of the joys of it was having a well-organized team. The hammer user went for the knockout, the blade weapon stayed on the tail to make sure they got it, and everyone prospered because we all got the Rathian Ruby, the Rathalos Mantle, or whatever we needed to make the rare armor set we were going for. Now it's totally gone. There's no more need for careful coordination or the use of specific weapons. It's all been streamlined.
And why should we care to grind for weapons and materials to get better gear if I can fight all these monsters naked, blindfolded, and do fine?
That's an exaggeration, but it's pretty much true. And as we said before, like, there are certain quality of life changes that are good, but I worry that what we've done is we have gone overboard and fundamentally invalidated a lot of pre-established mechanics without any thought as to whether we should just remove them altogether. And I'm not saying that they should be removed altogether. I mean, some of them should be, but not all of them. But just give thought to these mechanics. Be deliberate about them. Give them a reason, give them a purpose, give them a function, give them a cost, but all that's gone. Now, I suspect a lot of the issues that I have with this game surrounding the difficulty has come from the fact that players have been buffed. The players have never had more options in terms of their weapon and the moveset, and the monsters have never been so limited. Now, y'all know, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, that we have a big problem with Elden Ring, because in Elden Ring, it felt like you were playing Dark Souls 3, but fighting Sekiro bosses, instead of being in Dark Souls 3 and fighting Dark Souls 3 bosses. The same is true here, but it's like reversed. That now what it feels like is you have become so powerful, and instead of the monsters growing in power with you, they've stayed the same. They haven't moved to balance out the new power that you've gained. Now, in old Monster Hunter, you as the player being limited, very limited, worked because so were the monsters. The monsters didn't have a lot of this excessive power. You didn't either. So it was a level playing field. And monster abilities need to be balanced around player abilities. That what the monster can do should be based around what you can do, and what you can do should be based around what the monsters can do. And this wasn't perfect in older titles, but it was better.
Well, but imagine if they applied that in Monster Hunter Wilds, they would have to essentially make it to where if the monster hits you 2 or 3 times in a fight, he now gets 3 wound focus attacks on you, which stagger you into infinity, and you just lay there and get hit for the next 10 minutes.
But now, players have been given such an abundance of new tools and abilities, while monsters have been handicapped, ultimately resulting in the boring slog of gameplay that we have now, and I don't like it.
And on the topic of new tools and kind of quality of life features, there are some good ones, like some of the new perfect guard stuff and new weapon moves. I mean, the weapons have felt as good as they ever have. The problem is, it comes in a game where the monsters already feel weak, so it's just even easier to beat up on them. And for every good tool or quality of life change you get, I can also find one like needing to pay to change your appearance, or not being able to just invite your friend directly into a game to play with you. When you do multiplayer story missions, One guy has to ride out and hit the monster to start, at which point your friend must now ride back out to the monster from camp instead of y'all just both going to fight him together.
And whatever difficulty is here is largely due to bad design. Now, let me give you several examples. You have, in this game, many instances of what I like to call visual diarrhea, where you cannot make heads or tails of what's going on because the visuals are so obstructive, are so blinding. I'm thinking particularly of New Udra's flames. His flames are an eyesore. It is tough to look at him when this is happening because I can't make heads or tails of what he's doing. You also have Ray Dow's arena in which you fight him. It is so obstructive. It's so bright. It's so blue. It's distracting. Tone it down, please. Or you also have Arkveld's explosions. There is no need for him to pull an Allahu Akbar with every attack that fills my screen with white. Have we not learned our lesson from Consort Radahn? Can we please stop? Furthermore, some of the hitboxes are horrid. I have been hit by so much nonsense in this game. Now, some of them are good, but there's a lot that are garbage. Kongalala's belly bump will hit you when you're standing off to his side. Uth Duma's slow motion flip is comical with its hitboxes. And there have been many times where I was standing behind Nursilla when Nursilla goes to do the front ground pound, and I still get hit. Now, we touched on this earlier, but there's also a lot of arena issues. And I suppose it's more of a camera issue than it is necessarily an arena issue, but the arenas can be obstructive. Like, sometimes the arenas are so small, your camera doesn't know how to react to it. Also, zoom the camera out, please. I beg of you. I beg of you. There are so many arenas that are tiny that force the camera right up my rectum. Like when I'm trying to fight Fulgur Anjanath, his arena is tiny. Gormagala's arena is tiny. Ray Dow's arena is filled with blue stuff that makes it hard to see. How have we not fixed the cameras in these games? These third-person action games keep fumbling the camera. How have we not figured this out?
And I remember it specifically in Anjanath's arena. They start you right next to these steps, kind of in this Wyverian ruins area. And within the first 10 seconds of the fight, I and the monster were getting like knocked into these steps and like halfway up on an elevated plane and halfway wanting to be down on the ground level. And it was terrible.
Well, on top of all that, you even have a lot of attacks that are unintuitively designed. And I realized you could do this in previous Monster Hunters, but you don't know what you don't know. And there was a time whenever we were, and this is like the first death I think both of us had, when we're fighting Jindahad. He does this big thing where he curls up and does this massive ice attack, and there are ice blocks that are hanging on the ceiling. Now, what I did is I pulled the ice blocks down on top of his head, thinking that's what you were supposed to do. Turns out you had to save these for when he does that attack. Not knowing that, I died instantly because we didn't have the blocks that we needed to get behind, because I pulled them all down in his head. And here's another one. Zoshia's Inferno, I still have no clue how to get out of that attack. Maybe you have to outspace it, I don't know. Since we're talking about the unintuitive nature of these attacks, you would think, because previously what you've seen is that you have to hide behind certain obstacles to protect yourself from monster attacks. You think, okay, he's doing a flame attack, let's get behind one of these obstacles. Well, it turns out that doesn't really help you because you still take constant fire damage. Focusing on something else that makes this game slightly difficult because of the bad design. I don't know how they pulled this off. They give monsters comically generous telegraphs. Now, let me explain to you something that happened that I would never have thought would be something I complain about in the game, is telegraphs that are so good they're bad. Because characters do the whole, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna do it, are you ready, I'm gonna do it, and then they do it. There was one time I was fighting Doshagama, I was using a lance, and I went to go perfect guard what he was doing. He held it so long that I completely ran out of stamina, and he smacked me. Because the telegraph was that comically generous. And although that is one of the knocks against it that I would say that makes it too easy, there are times when it works all the way around and backfires to making the game like unintentionally hard. Because these telegraphs are just wonky. Let it be known that we've also said that Monster Hunter doesn't need to be overly difficult, it needs to be fun. The problem is we have gone so far in the opposite direction from making things difficult to making them so insanely easy that we've lost our way, truly.
I also have a sneaking suspicion that whenever Master Rank drops, they are going to overcorrect so hard, and every monster is going to have big AoE one-shots to try and make up for this criticism.
I mean, that's kind of what it was in Rise. Base Rise was pretty easy, and then when the Master Rank version comes along, everyone just has, like, crazy AoE spam. So, I guess the problem with Monster Hunter is really, it's that low rank and high rank are way too easy, and Master Rank is way too hard, whereas I think we'd be better served like finding a happy medium in between those two. But even in previous titles, you could, like Freedom Unite, again, to reference that game, I've died multiple times in low rank. Even in low rank, it's difficult. Like, it takes real skill and work to defeat these monsters, whereas there's never a point in this new game where you're challenged, ever. And whenever people say, oh, it's fine, it'll be better in master rank, that's an unacceptable answer. It's totally unacceptable to have a game be so easy, it never challenges you, it never pushes you, it never requires anything of you for a full game.
And now we got to focus on something, unfortunately, that the dev team put a heavy focus on that I don't think many of the players wanted, which was the story and characters. The story of previous Monster Hunter games a lot of times could be summed up in a sentence or two, which is, a monster's wreaking havoc, go kill it, go deal with it. The story of a Monster Hunter game is a lot like the story of most Godzilla movies. It's a thing to be endured, not savored. You're there to see giant kaiju fights, or to fight giant kaijus in the case of Monster Hunter, not watch a bunch of stupid characters do things that we don't care about.
Eat cheesy bread. Oh, by the way, Elder Dragons have been in every Monster Hunter before this. Where are they? Why have they been replaced with constructs? What are we doing? Where are they?
Especially in a game that focuses more on the story and lore than ever. So, a big problem I have with this story is it tries to flesh out the characters and give meaning to why we're here on this hunt, but it ruins the pace of the game in doing so. I'm going to give you the super Cliff Notes version of this story, so I'll put a timestamp on screen that you can skip to if you don't want spoilers. The guild is on a research trip, and they find a lost boy who's named Nata from the Forbidden Lands that got separated from his clan due to a monster attack. The guild then authorizes an expedition to explore the Forbidden Lands to try and reunite Nata with his clan and stop the monster that's wreaking havoc. The guild actually didn't even know that there were humans in the Forbidden Lands prior to this point. Now, the hunter and his people witnessed the White Wraith, which is the monster that they were talking about, attacking other monsters while saving various tribes from monster attacks.
That's my alter ego when I hit the street. They call me the White Wraith.
And they call me the White Devil. But we'll see a couple White Devils later in the story. Nata is reunited with his tribe eventually, and they discover that his tribe are actually the descendants of an ancient civilization known as the Wyverians. The guild discovers that the Wyverians created these synthetic monsters called Guardians to defend them. They don't tell us what they're defending them from, but Tashin, who is the head of the Keepers, which is Nata's clan, tells you that the Guardians are synthetic, so they don't need to eat, and they can't die of natural causes. Now, one of the Guardians, Zoshia, who's the final boss of low rank, ended up turning on the ancient Wyverians and destroyed their society. Zoshia has actually taken over Dragon Torch, which is the source of Wyvern milk, which is the energy source that the Wyverians created, and they use the land spines across the Forbidden Lands to distribute Wyvern milk. After Zoshia destroyed the Wyverian civilization, the Guardians all fell into a deep sleep. But Guardian Arkveld, aka the White Wraith, awakens, prompting the events of this game. The hunter defeats Guardian Arkveld and Zoshia, and Nata theorizes that the Guardian Arkveld was feasting on other monsters to become real.
There are others like it that found a way to return to what they truly were. One day, they'll find their place and become a part of this world again.
I'm sure they will. Life is a lot more resilient than we humans know.
We're not going to ask how that works. But in the post-credits, Nata and the hunter discover that Guardian Arkveld actually laid an egg, and when they find it, it's already hatched.
It's Arkveld's. The will to live always finds a way.
Once again, not really sure who he reproduced with or how, given that he's synthetic, but we won't ask questions. Now, this new baby Arkveld has also been feasting on monsters, just like the original Arkveld. The guild and Nata both support the hunter to kill the new Guardian Arkveld. There's even a particularly cringe scene here where this experienced hunter looks to Nata, a young child, for his permission on whether or not to kill this monster.
We can't leave it like this. The path we must take is clear. Nata.
You sure?
If I were a hunter, it's what I would do.
All right.
In fact, pretty much every cutscene throughout this story with Nata is insanely cringe. There's one where he literally wants to fight the Arkveld, and the hunter has to hold him back.
can't!
Why? Why did it attack us? Did we do something wrong? There must be a reason, right? You're a hunter. You've got a weapon, and you do nothing? Give it to me, and I'll... Why won't you let me go?
I have a feeling the only reason he even exists in this game is to tick a box to appease Capcom's investors. And his character art throughout the course of the story is essentially poor lost kid separated from his tribe to becoming a moral paragon of wisdom and virtue.
Arkfeld and I are the same. It broke the chains that were holding me and my people back.
So, am I hearing you right when you're saying that the story is essentially an elongated way of saying a monster is wreaking havoc, go kill it?
Yes, the story takes about 1,000 extra steps to get you there, with lots of cringe dialogue and uninteresting cutscenes, but essentially it still boils down to, this monster was doing bad things, please deal with him.
Wow. I'm so glad my time was thoroughly wasted. With these, with over 10 walkie-talkie sections where all my agency is removed. That's why I play video games, to be yapped at.
Yep, and I counted 14 of those walkie-talkie sections when I was going back through the cutscenes. There could be more. But those are a perfect summation of why we're so frustrated with the focus on story, because if you want to come at us and say, well, you can skip all the cutscenes, okay, fair enough. You can't skip all these walkie-talkie sections. On top of that, in the walkie-talkie sections, the actual things you're talking about are so unsubstantive. I mean, I remember there's one where you're going to gather honey. There's one where you're just traveling from the base camp to the forest. There's one of you traveling from the forest to the Everforge. None of these conversations are substantive, and I think it's proved out that they clearly aren't substantive, because later, when you're at Azu's, the Everforge, and Isai needs to rush back to his village due to a weather event, you get a cutscene that teleports you back to that event. So clearly they understand that you don't want to sit there and watch and have to listen to riding back and having mundane conversations, yet they force you to do it 10 plus other times throughout the game. Which begs the question, why do these sections exist?
Because Sony exclusives are doing well, so why don't we match them?
On top of the walkie-talkie sections, there are a lot of cutscenes that accomplish nothing outside of just bloating the runtime. There is a scene in Isai's village where they stop to have a feast of cheesy bread and beans.
That scene in particular broke me. It was after I saw that, and after I had felt insulted and had my time wasted, I'm skipping all of it. So this is all him. I haven't seen any of this. I skipped it all.
And to note, I skipped it all too, but just for the sake of having an accurate video, I went back and rewatched the cutscenes on YouTube. And on top of the cheesy bread scene, you've got Eric following Lalabarina florets and collecting them while yapping about how interesting it is and what this monster is. You have a scene where you're going through the forest talking to these little woodwoods, which are essentially like Ewoks from Star Wars that are only there for comical relief, even though they're not funny.
All this is so frustrating because in previous Monster Hunter titles, I mean, it wasn't until Monster Hunter Rise that you actually had named characters. Let that sink in. The vast majority of Monster Hunter as a series is so uninterested in stories and characters and all that jazz, they don't even name the characters. But here, it's the focus. How anyone can say, this is faithful to the original, this is like the original, I don't understand. Truly, I don't. We have shifted focus, and we've done it to all the wrong things.
None of this story or its characters are interesting enough or developed enough to warrant spending this much time on it.
Let's get to the part that makes me the angriest. That all that's bad, but here's what's worse. Leftism has found its way into Monster Hunter.
Incredible. Oh, so much diversity.
Oh, no, 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 no.
Propaganda is riddled throughout this game. And because it's slightly subtle, because it's not Dragon Age the Veilguard type overt propaganda, most people don't see it and think the game's amazing. It drives me insane. But we have proof that it is intentional.
Both inside the game and out. And I think we want to start outside the game with just following the money, which usually will lead you to the source. So
always lead you to the source.
Oy vey! So before we even start getting to the investors, early last year, Capcom's localization team made this big post on Twitter, and I'll put it up there so you can read the whole thing. There's a lot of interesting nonsense in there, but the thing I want to focus in on is they made sure to say that localization involves adapting not only the linguistic aspects, but also addressing gender-specific language, cultural norms, and diverse perspectives.
Since we were all asking for that they just had to be in my Monster Hunter game.
That's what all true Monster Hunter fans want, man. But on top of that, let's look at their investors. The top investor in Capcom, owning 13% of the shares, is the Master Trust Bank of Japan. Now, when we go look at their website, what do we find? They are touting that 2 years in a row, 2021-2022, 100% of female workers in the company are in management. Now, unfortunately for these bigots, in 2023, that fell all the way to 89.5%.
Whatever will we do?
But they make it a key part of their business to promote female employees to the top.
By the way, let it be known, these people, they own 13% of Capcom shares. 13%.
Well, and it's interesting to note, number 2 and number 5 are just as bad. At number 2, we've got JP Morgan coming in at 11% of shares owned. Now, there's been a stir up here recently of the Trump administration going after DEI and ESG policies, but Jamie Dimon, who is the head of JP Morgan, has come out and said he will not back down from this. And in a letter to shareholders back in April 2024, he made sure to let people know that the bank's $30 billion racial equity commitment that launched back in 2020 was nearly complete and will become a permanent part of the bank's operational strategy. And now if we go to their 5th largest shareholder, which is going to be State Street, coming in at 5% of shares owned, we take one look at their 2023 ESG sheet available on their website, and we see that their focus is on reducing carbon emissions, water reduction, and making sure that they continue to promote female board members and racially diverse board members. That's where their head is at. Not providing value to their shareholders, and that's a consistent theme across all 3 of those investors we mentioned.
These are the top investors. These are the big players here at Capcom that essentially run Capcom. And every one of them is on the same page about injecting these woke politics into your game, and we can see it in the game. And I love how people try and ignore it. Like Endymion has to make 4 videos in 5 days about how this game isn't woke. But what you're greeted with when you open up the character creator option is body type A and body type B. Now that goes even further, because the character designs in this game are hideously ugly. I know people have been simping over Gemma. I get it if you own a brown bag, but she is a butterface. What are we doing? You gooners have to calm down. Just because she's well endowed does not mean she is nice to look at least not her face.
Gemma specifically is such a cheap one where Eastern devs think they can get away with just throwing a pair of big knockers on a girl and still leaving her ugly and having a stupid zoomer haircut. Also, making this young 20-something girl the blacksmith was not an accident. Let's stop the coat.
But the characters are also like comically diverse. The entirety of the oil well basin cast just strikes me as forced diversity. Take one look at this list of characters and tell me this isn't intentionally woke. Ada in particular. Her biceps and triceps are bigger than my head.
You think women built like the cast of the Gears of War men are woke? Crazy?
She makes Abby look small.
And I already know the defense that's coming with, well, these are the Forbidden Lands. Of course the characters are going to look exotic, but we only ever see it go one way. Diversity in the modern day just means no whites. That's what we see here.
Characters are also, they're horribly androgynous. Do not both of these look like hideously ugly androgynous blobs? I don't want to look at these characters. I want them off my screen now.
Get this off my daddy now.
Well, and building off the things we've been saying, I also noticed a trend in this story where the men really aren't present in the story and the women are the ones who really make the things happen and get stuff moving. There's a hilarious scene at the Everforge where Werner, the White Devil himself, fixes the land spine, and all of the diverse citizens of Azuz activate it anyway, despite Werner and the rest of the cast having a conversation in front of them where they say it's going to blow due to built up energy because it was damaged earlier. Now they do it anyways, and unsurprisingly, the forge fails and has an explosion.
If all that pent-up energy gets released at once, it'll probably trigger the fire spring. Well, too late. Repairs are done.
We'll unrepair it.
Why? It was broken, now it's not. Pretty sure that's what these folks want.
We will start the festival ceremonies anew!
Light it up! Good work!
We beckon the fire spring with our own hands!
No!
What's happening?
And just at that time, these giant fire monkeys start to invade the village. Now a little girl starts crying, and the people are starting to panic.
Oh no, how terrible!
Who steps up to save everyone? Gemma runs up on stage to let everyone know, hey, we have to think through this. And her speech is so great, she galvanizes Dogard, one of the chiefs, to use his brain and say, oh, we have a backup forge that we can route it to fix this.
This wasn't supposed to happen.
That's enough! Listen up! Feeling sorry for yourself won't help. We have to put our heads together and fix this. Think, is there anything we can do? Can we quell the fire or reroute it?
Yes! The old forge! It uses a different system!
If we fix it up, we might be able to disperse the fire.
Right.
There you go. You're gonna sit and cry or get up and help? Let's go.
Let's get this done!
He needed his white savior Gemma to tell him this, to be able to come to that on his own. Even though he's lived here his entire life, and I fail to see why she would need to remind him that.
Oh, it's because women are known for their decisive action and problem-solving skills while under duress.
And the funniest part is after they go forward with this plan and fix everything, Dogard and Maki, who was the little girl who was crying, both go to Gemma separately and thank her for single-handedly saving the day. And mind you, Gemma's speech was just saying, hey guys, what can we think of to fix this?
Thank you. We owe it all to you.
You really yelled the courage right back into me. You single-handedly saved the day.
Yeah, she did the think Mark meme.
She provided no solution. She just told the poor brown indigenous folks to use their brain.
I'm starting to see why these guys live in mud huts.
And contrast that in this same scene, Werner is pictured as the bad guy for fixing the land spine that the indigenous people of the tribe asked him to fix. And he and the others tell them that it will be bad if they choose to activate it, yet they do it anyways. And once this is all finished, they paint the scene as he's kind of sulking after this whole thing is fixed and it's his fault. But he warned them and they chose not to listen.
You can't make this up. The story is horrible. Which again, why focus on it? This is not your strong suit.
Forget it.
Capcom.
You're out of your element.
Now, another thing that really infuriates me about the shift in focus that we've seen from the Monster Hunter series is all the normies running defense for this game. It drives me up a wall. It even comes from people like Endymion, who tout themselves and hail themselves as the anti-woke YouTuber, who assures us that the game is not woke, while there's a gigantic muscular black woman on my screen.
They're a bunch of native brown-skinned people, and wow, they don't push their culture down your throat or try to belittle you or make a point to say that they're superior to you. No. They just simply exist, and it just feels natural to the world that's around you. The West could really never do this these days.
And he warns us, we can't call this woke either, because it will divide the movement, because we're all gamers, and we all want to see DEI and ESG and all the other buzzwords die.
But I think downplaying the success of Wilds to simply it has women or a dark-skinned character means it's bad is just going to do nothing for Gamergate as a movement.
I'm sitting here like, brother, you can't detect anything woke unless it's Veilguard levels of overt. We are not on the same team.
The fact that out of all the instances he chooses to use in his video to say this game is not woke, he uses the one where you see the massive buff black woman. He's like, well, this makes sense because it's organic. There is nothing organic about this broad. She would need like gallons and gallons of protein shake to get that big. And he's like, this is perfectly normal. I see nothing wrong here.
It's organic because you're indigenous people in a foreign land.
Oh, but don't worry. We have Legendary Drops with his spicy hot take that both sides are bad. And he praises Monster Hunter Wilds for having widened its audience without alienating its core audience.
You know, Monster Hunter as a series has only continued to grow, exponentially grow its audience in a way that very few in this industry understand, and I think very few can even try to replicate. We've seen franchise after franchise, studio after studio try to broaden their appeal, widen their audience, only to alienate the core audience that they have. Saints Row, Diablo, Battlefield, Halo, Dragon Age, there's a long list of games that have completely left their audiences behind. Monster Hunter Wilds is a testament to just giving players what they want. Give them what they're looking for from your games.
On top of that, he opens his brain dead video by saying, all you had to do was make a great game. Look, guys, it isn't so hard. It sold 8 million in 3 days.
Monster Hunter Wilds just bodied the entire industry. 8 million copies sold in less than 3 days. I thought it was hard to sell a AAA game nowadays. I thought it was tough out on these streets. It's almost like if you make a good game, people buy it.
Well, it sold 8 million in 3 days because you and a bunch of other brain-dead normies were going to like it no matter what. You made that decision before the game launched.
It's the same old song and dance for these sycophants. A game comes out that looks good and they drool and like they fall over themselves like, content. Oh, consume. This game good. Oh.
It doesn't even look good. It has PS2 textures.
And it's people like this that are killing the things that I love, the things that other people love. These niche, strictly defined games that have carved their own path are being normified for these two massive retards. I can't take it, man. The unmitigated praise this game is getting from all these normies is just a sign of how far we've fallen. I mean, consider this. This game performs like crap. Right now, it's sitting at mixed on Steam, and yet people eat it up. It is sold faster than any other Monster Hunter is sold by a country mile.
And if you read those Steam reviews, they will only ever criticize the performance. They still think the game's amazing.
Despite it being, again, a fundamentally different game than the games that came before. It's not Monster Hunter. It's this Sony-fied story variant of Monster Hunter that's just wearing Monster Hunter skin. Oh, but the normies love it. It's a big success. All the difficulty has been removed, and it's reduced this game down to a boring slog that requires nothing of its players. Oh, but the normies love it. They're clapping like seals. They can't get enough. Their slop runneth over. They need more. And again, these normies, they pretend like this game isn't woke. Whenever this giant black woman is flexing her triceps in their face. Make it make sense. Make it make sense, please. Now, all of this has led me to the conclusion, and I think we all know where this is going. You have to gatekeep your favorite games. You have to gatekeep these IPs. Because when the normies attach themselves to it, it will die. It will lose its identity. It will forsake the thing that got it to the dance. It happens all the time. How many examples do you need? And if your IP, if your favorite game, if your favorite series has not been destroyed yet, it is on the chopping block. That's where we are right now. Now, for a long time, Monster Hunter was faithful to its foundation while attempting to keep the formula fresh. They tried things, some of those things didn't work, so they got rid of them, but that formula was still a winning formula. Oh, but then we got to Monster Hunter World and everything changed. And sure, you had some quality of life features that were greatly appreciated, but they also fundamentally began to change the game, to include these walkie-talkie sections, to be heavy on the cutscenes, to start slowly but surely changing Monster Hunter from a hardcore action game built around careful prep to just mash triangle and succeed. And now, after World, sure, it sold well, but its entrance into the mainstream has had a profoundly negative impact on the series. And I suspect that due to that success, the devs and the investors thought, oh, people love this. This is where we take this series. And it's hard to blame them whenever the market speaks and says, yes, we like this, more please. But it leaves people like me feeling left out, because the thing that I have been invested in for so long has now been captured by people who have no clue what it is supposed to be. All they know is what it is now. They don't know how great Monster Hunter Freedom Unite was. All they know is Monster Hunter World.
Just want to talk to him.
Why do you have a shotgun?
I just want to talk to him.
Dad, this is ridiculous.
I just want to talk to him. I just want to talk to him. I just want to talk to him.
Now, looking back on it, It all makes sense. I get why the devs did what they did. But the unfortunate part is they've been rewarded for leaving people like me in the dust.
Well, they've received an abundant amount of shekels for their great performance in Monster Hunter Wilds, despite all the issues we've gone over.
This whole thing, this gatekeeping, it's such a difficult line to walk. Because on one hand, you want the game to succeed so you get sequels and you get more of it. But on the other hand, you don't want it to catch the attention of the normies. Because when they see it, and when they attach themselves to this new thing, whatever it may be, they destroy it. But unfortunately, Monster Hunter has gone mainstream. And it's just the latest victim of this all-devouring swarm of normies that have destroyed the thing that I loved.
Rest in peace, King. We'll remember you.
I remember you for what you were and not what you became.